Hi, it's Paul Brennan from the Bring Our Birds Home campaign. Thanks to everybody for their messages of support and for visiting our Facebook page and leaving comments. Absolutely fantastic. It's quite a big job. We're in the early stages, and who knows where it's going to end up. We might get all of them, we might get some of them, we might just get one of them, but even getting one of them will be worth it because it will be too late soon, and that, as I've said before, would be so sad. So we're trying everything we can, and there'll be updates coming shortly to benchmark the progress that we are making as we move towards the goal. And there will be some interesting announcements shortly. One of the questions that comes up a lot is how will you display these artifacts, assuming you'll get some here and maybe one day they will go on display. What's the plan there? Well, that's probably someone else's problem, but there are plenty of precedents around the world for how to display items, particularly of this size, airliner size. Let's start with the biggest first, the 747. Let's assume that we might get NZV back to New Zealand. How are we going to display it? Well, the Speyer Technik Museum in Germany has done a great job with their Lufthansa 747-200. They've put it up on a platform in a sort of a flying position. You can climb up there and walk on the wing and have a look through the aircraft. That's one way of doing it, probably an expensive way of doing it, but very creative. And of course, being elevated, the visibility is fantastic for the museum from areas around the museum. So there's that. The Dutch have at the National Luchtvaart Thema Park Aviodrome a 747-200 XKLM, one of those stretched upper deck versions. And interestingly, with this one, they dismantled it at Schiphol International Airport and shipped it to the museum grounds and reassembled it. You can't tell that it's been dismantled and reassembled, and that's probably what we would have to do with NZV. Let's say we managed to get possession of it at Domodedovo Airport in Russia. We'd have to get it dismantled because it's not going to fly again, and somehow ship it back. And then it's a matter of then transporting it to the display site and reassembling it like the Dutch have done here. In fact, this is probably the model for that aircraft of how to transport it back and then reassemble it for display. It looks fantastic. So they've done a great job there. Unfortunately, I don't think our climate will allow prolonged outdoor display of these items, unlike the Qantas Museum at Longreach, where they've been able to put their 74200 EBQ out in the open along with their very first 707 short fuselage, which was flown in from Southend, UK, a number of years ago. Fantastic story that. You can look that one up on YouTube or on the internet to find out about that. I don't think we'll be doing that, but good on them for saving the artifacts and displaying them to the public. Then there's the Evergreen Wings and Waves Water Park in McMinnville, Oregon, and they've done a fantastic thing here with putting the 747-100 freighter up on the roof. And you can see that there's a tube here. I'm not too sure if this is a hydro slide. It might be, actually. And an observation area, so you can obviously walk up and have a look in there. And because it's elevated, again, a fantastic landmark. You can see it from a long way away. And really, I would imagine, helps the museum's visibility in the area. So there is another way of displaying an aircraft of this size in a museum situation. South African Airways have preserved one of their 747-200s at the SAA Museum at Rand Airport in South Africa. Again, probably the climate conducive to an outdoor display, but here it is. And obviously you can walk up the air stairs there, have a look at the aircraft. Probably not an option in New Zealand because of the climate. It would deteriorate quite quickly. But again, they've gone to the effort of preserving one of their 747s and they're displaying it to the public, which is fantastic. Then there's the Frontiers of Flight Museum at Love Field, Dallas, Texas, of course the home of Southwest Airlines. And what they've done here is quite an interesting thing. They've got 737-300, I think, on display in the museum. Half of it, or more than half of it, is sticking out of the museum wall into the outside. But the front section is actually inside the museum. So that obviously sort of works for space. It allows people to get into the aircraft from indoors. And obviously you can walk down to the rear of the aircraft. But that's part of the museum and an interesting way of displaying it. Sort of almost half and half indoor, outdoor. And the Museum of Flight in Seattle have a US Air 73 inside the museum building. They haven't got the whole aircraft. They've got it to just behind the wing, beautifully polished up. I've actually been in this museum and had a look in this aircraft, and it's sort of half cabin and half display. And they've sort of done the same thing at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. with just the front section of the 747-100 ex-Northwest Airlines. So it's sort of sticking out from the wall here, and you can walk up and get onto it. And I think, the cockpit is fully installed and all the power's on, and the front first class cabin you can walk through, and maybe there's an engine or two hanging around there. And even the Moorabbin Museum in New South Wales, Australia, have secured a 737-200 for display. You see it here sitting in the hangar. They're getting ready to put it into the museum. If they can do it, we can do it. And of course, there's the video that we've been showing on the Facebook page of the Air France 747-100 at the museum in Le Bourget, Paris, where they've done a fantastic job of displaying it. You can walk in and look at the structure, look at the cabin, the galleys, the loos, the upstairs first class lounge, which is very groovy. Everything's there. It's been so well thought out. And I think if we were displaying a 747 in this country, we would want to do something very similar to this. Fantastic effort. This is the way to do it. I think if we were to display all these aircraft in one place, the model to look at is the Museum of Flight in Seattle, where they've created this sort of roof structure big enough to accommodate the number one 747. They've got number one 72, 737 in there, also a 787, big items. It's not a complicated structure, but it keeps the weather off. It makes a good experience for the people coming to the museum and viewing the artifacts. I think it probably would minimize the cost in displaying these aircraft in one place, weather protected. So this is the model, I think, for how we would do it locally if we were able to get them all back here, let's say, the dream situation, to get them all in one place and to display them. This is how we would do it. So you can just imagine how we could display those aircraft here in New Zealand after what you've seen there. A few examples. It would be fantastic, and I believe it would be a commercial success. Any museum established in New Zealand showing those exhibits to those standards would make money, in my view.